So, welcome aboard, everybody. Thanks for joining. We have a very, very fascinating topic to discuss today, and that is, can God be bought? And we're going to see how our Parsha Vayakel comes into play here. But this seems to be a no-brainer. Can God be bought? Well, we see so many different sources that would suggest, no, of course, God cannot be bought. If you look at there's a very interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avot at the end of the 5th chapter, the 29th Mishnah there, where it says clearly in describing the attributes of God, Hashem is neither a masvo panim, he does not show favoritism, nor is God a mikach shochad. He does not take bribes. You cannot bribe God. And we'll see more about that in a moment. You can also interpret and extrapolate from the fact that God has a very strong prohibition that we cannot take bribes, that hashochad yaver einei chachamim, even the most wise person cannot take a bribe because it blinds you to what you should be doing. And we know there's a rule: God has to live by God's own commandments. That's one of the reasons why you have this kind of bizarre statement in Anim Zmirot, Kesher Tefillin Herali Anav, that God showed Moshe God's tefillin. Well, how does God wear tefillin? If God doesn't have a body, he doesn't have a head, he doesn't have an arm, how's he going to put on tefillin? So, even Chabad can't really get God to put on tefillin because ein lo demut haguf ein no guf. But the point that Anim Zmirot is making is that God Ke'ilu, virtually, as it were, has to also fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin because he gives that commandment, so he has to abide by it as well. So if he tells us we can't take bribes, then God can't take bribes either. However, that's not so simple to understand, because let's look at our parsha of Shkalim this week, right? Vayakel is coupled with Parshat Shkalim, because we talk about the collection of the half shekel every Adar, at the beginning of Adar, in this case, the Adar that's connected to Purim, and we'll say a word about that in a moment. You have to give, every person would give a half shekel. The rich could not give more, the poor could not give less. It would have to be exactly a half shekel. What was this used for? It was intrinsically for Bedek Habayit. It was to sustain the Mishkan and later on the Beit HaMikdash. You need money for the upkeep of these very immense enterprises. So you have to collect money, and everybody has to be a part of that. But there's another aspect to the collection of the half shekel, because Chazal say that one of the interesting connections with the month of Adar, where Purim comes, indeed, perhaps why we do this in the second Adar. We know that when we have a leap year such as now, we celebrate Purim in the second Adar and not the first, which is in and of itself unusual. Without getting into that, because normally you do it as soon as you have an opportunity, but we wait till the second Adar. And what happened there? Well, the story of Purim includes this preamble before the plot of Haman is going to be perpetrated. So Haman offers a bribe to Achashverosh to massacre the Jews. Of course, we know, interestingly enough, Achashverosh, who is not some jolly fat old guy that, is pushed around by everybody, he hates the Jews. He dislikes the Jews as much as Haman. So he turns down the bribe. That's another story. But the rabbis say that the half shekel that we collect and give for a holy purpose to maintain the Beit HaMikdash, that was an antidote against the money, the shekels, if you will, that Haman was willing to pay to Achashverosh. So if we think about this a little bit deeper, what is going on here? Hashem is angry at the Jews of Persia because despite Mordechai's urging, they decide that they're going to go and be, in a sense, more loyal to Achashverosh and the Persian government than they are to God. Mordechai says, don't go to this huge banquet that Achashverosh throws. It's lewd, it's crude, it uses the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash, and they go anyway. So Hashem is angry, and he turns, as it were, away from us. He can't stand to look at us. He engages in what's called Hester Panim, which is where Esther gets her name. It's not her real name. Esther refers to the fact that God is looking away. He can't look at us even because we're doing something that he very much opposes. And so this plot to basically wipe out the Jewish people, this genocide, it starts to take form until what happens? We begin to do mitzvot, we begin to do good things, including the giving of the shekels. And later on, as we'll see, we also engage in communal prayer and fasting, etc. And then God is, let's say, his anger is taken away, and he comes back to protect us. So in a sense, that you might say is a kind of bribe, that God decides he's going to do something, but we pay God off with these mitzvot, and then we're spared, and everything turns out great, and we have the Purim Seudah and Mishloach Manot and, Orava, Simcha, and all kinds of good things. So now I'm not so sure if we can't, in some sense, buy God. Let's look at another story in the Torah, and that's the famous dream that Yaakov has, where the angels are going up and down, and Yaakov realizes that he really is in the presence of God, and he makes a deal with God. And he says, this is in Vayetze, this is in the 28th parak in Bereshit, and Yaakov makes this very interesting deal. He says, if God will be with me, ushmarani b'derech hazeh, he'll guard me on my path. V'natani lechem lechol, beged lilbosh, he'll give me clothes, he'll give me food, he'll give me security. If he does all that, then he will be my God. Well, this looks a little bit like you're basically buying off God. And you're saying that, God, I'm going to pay you all these things, and then you're going to do what I need you to do. We have another example of this same kind of syndrome, and that is Yom Kippur. What happens on Yom Kippur? We're headed to a bad decree, or we could be headed to a very bad decree in the Yeshiva Shel Mala, in the heavenly tribunal. So what do? We take a sharp turn from the direction in which we're headed in order to avoid anything negative happening to us, and we engage in certain acts. We know what they are because we scream it out in shul, and we say teshuva utefila utzedakah ma'avirin et roa hagzera. Yeah, there's a bad decree, a bad event waiting to happen to us, that God, is obviously he's in charge of everything that happens, but we're going to somehow evade and avoid that by repenting, or by giving tzedakah, by davening very hard. So that almost looks like, again, a kind of bribe. God was going to do something, but we found a way to pay him off so that this doesn't happen to us. So I want to suggest that there is a difference between buying God and buying God off. We cannot do a sin or plan to do a sin and buy God off and tell God, look the other way, that God just basically don't pay attention or ignore or excuse this sin we're about to do. You can't do that. God won't do that. You do a sin and you will suffer the consequences. Even Moshe, for all his stored up treasure of merits, of zechuyot, even Moshe could not evade the ramifications of striking the rock against Hashem's will. He would have to pay that price. He was not allowed into Israel. You can't say to God, for example, I've been observant all my life. Give me some slack. I'll trade off some of the mitzvot that I've done for a few choice averot, and pick your poison. I'll have a ham sandwich, a little bit of adultery, maybe some mixed dancing. I threw that in there. And, we'll say to God, look the other way. I've done a lot of good stuff. Take some of my equity, take some of what I've built up and use that and just kind of turn a blind eye to what I want to do that normally, or that you're always against. You can't do that. That's not going to work. You can't buy God off. But to some extent, there is something you can purchase. There is something you can do. You can buy protection, and you can do things that are going to protect you. You can engage in chesed, you give charity, you can pray every day, and you can, while you can't buy yourself or buy off God to do a sin, but you can protect ourselves from being harmed. We face the vicissitudes of life every day, and around us, there's, God forbid, there's sickness, there's poverty, there's danger, there's depression. We want to avoid all those things. How do we avoid it? We avoid it by doing all the right things, and that is going to protect us. And that's what happened on Purim. As I said earlier, we decided to do the right things. We decided we were going to pray to God. We were going to fast, which is another form of prayer. We were going to return to be loyal to Hashem and not to Achashverosh. And at that point, we protected ourselves. We bought some protection so that Haman's plot did not come true. And all of these seemingly coincidental things happened to bring Haman down and to protect the Jewish people. So this is something that is okay to do. It's something that, as I say, you can't buy off God if you deserve something to happen to you because of something wrong you did. But you can buy protection so that, and you can do it even at a later stage, a kind of insurance that says that these things hopefully won't affect us. So the Parsha of Shkalim is an interesting examination and an interesting approach to this idea. Over and over in this small portion we're going to read this Shabbat, one phrase keeps coming up. And you hear it when we say, Ish kofer nafsho, giving the shkalim, provide a kofer for the soul. And then we see, we repeat that phrase. We say the money, lechaper al nafshotechem. We call it kesef hakipurim. And we use over and over and over this word kofer. We know that this word connects to something else, kaporet. The cover of the Aron has the same root as this word kofer. Kofer can mean ransom. Even in today's Hebrew, we use the word kofer as ransom. But we also use it to mean a cover. And this is the connection. the mitzvot we do give us a certain coverage, in a sense like insurance. They form a protective shield that wards off the many dangers that might threaten us. They help to connect us to Hashem, and that's where real safety lies. In a sense, every time we act in accordance with God, we get closer to Hashem, and the closer we are, the more safe and secure we automatically become. We move, in a sense, into God's orbit by the things we do. And that, if you will, not only ransoms our soul, but it forms a protective cover, like the cover of the Aron protected that which was inside. The heart, of course, which were the 10 Commandments, the Luchot. And that's why we call the day Yom Kippurim. It has a kind of double meaning. On the one hand, it is a day that we protect ourselves with this cover, so that if there will come a time that without the cover, something negative would happen to us, we're protected. We, in a sense, have purchased or secured God's goodwill towards us because of what we've done. So we, in a sense, every day really is Yom Kippurim. Every day is a day that we can do something to cover ourselves, to protect ourselves. But on Yom Kippur in particular, we go to an extreme. As you know, the file is being opened and the judgment is being considered. So we want to show Hashem who we really are or really can be. That we're not interested in eating, we're not interested in drinking. We have really only one ambition and one desire, and that is to come closer to Hashem. In a sense, by being more angelic, angels don't eat, angels don't drink, angels don't have physical relations. By our abstaining from those things on this one day a year, not something we would obviously do every day, but we're making a statement and saying to God, Hashem, we're trying to come closer to you, to be more angelic, if you will, and to stay away from any kind of sin so that we will be protected. And this is the kaporet, the cover that we're placing over ourselves. And it has, of course, this double meaning, because we say Yom HaKippurim or Yom Kippurim means literally a day like Purim. And so we will be saved just like we were on Purim, that we were headed for disaster. We had done all the wrong things. And as a result of that, it wasn't so much that God was causing Haman to plot against us and want to kill us. It was more a sense of God simply, if you will, absenting himself from the situation. And that's very dangerous. God never wants these negative, terrible things to happen to us. The question is, are we engaging God so that he's always there to provide us with this kind of force field, this protective shield that's going to prevent these things from happening? The minute that God, as it were, turns away and is not looking over us and watching over us, that's when these negative things start to happen. So in essence, what we want to say is, no, God cannot be bought off. You cannot bribe God to say that I'm going to commit this sin or that sin, but we want you to look the other way. That we can't do. But we certainly can, if you will, by God or by God's goodwill or God's love for us, God's protection of us, that we can do by engaging in these acts, because the dynamic is, by doing them, we get closer to God, and the closer we are, the more protected that we will be. So this, I think, is the dichotomy, the dual idea of, on the one hand, we can't excuse God. God can forgive, of course, and God is Erech Apayim. God is not rushing to judgment. God is very long-suffering and patient with us. That's true. But at the end of the day, those negative things we do are going to have negative consequences. But we can avoid some of the pitfalls of life and some of the negative things that occur in life if we form this closer connection to Hashem, and then this kind of shield, we enter within the space of that shield and we're automatically protected. So I want to close by saying prayer both for the hostages, that they should be safe, that God should keep them safe until hopefully they will be freed, and also will heal all of those, in addition to the terrible numbers that we've suffered of those who have fallen. We're talking about thousands of soldiers and others who have been wounded, that certainly many of them in very serious circumstances. So we want to say a word for them too. So I'm going to recite these tefillot. Mishaberach Abotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov, v'yivarech et chayalei tzva Haganah Yisrael, kochot habitachon, העומדים על משמר ארצנו וערי אלוהינו. ייתן אדוני את אויבינו הקמים עלינו ניגפים לפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא, ישמרם מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, ידבר שונאינו תחתיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה ועטרת ניצחון. ויקוים בהם הכתוב, כי אדוני אלוהיכם הולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיעכם, ונאמר אמן. משברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב, יוסף, משה, אהרון ודוד ושלמה, יברך וישמור וינצור את אחינו בית ישראל השפויים. בעבור שאנו מתפללים בעבורם, הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם, ישמרם מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, ישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, יוציאם מחושך וצל מוות, ישיבם מהר לחיק משפחותיהם, ונאמר אמן. And finally, Mishaberach Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and Shlomo, Yivorach Rapid, Kol HaPitzuim, Me'apiguim, U'me'amilchama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yimalei Rachmim Aleichem, L'achlimam L'arpotam, L'achazikam L'achiotam, V'yishlach Lehem Meir Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim, L'kol Averihem, L'kol Gidehem B'toch Shachel, Shar Cholei Yisrael, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Hashtav HaGalav, Izman Kariv, and Omar, Amen. Next week, the plan is we're going to move to 5 o'clock so that we're a little bit later. I think that will help a lot of people, and this way provide for Mincha and Arvit at the same time. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and hopefully you will all be within that, all of us and all of the Jewish people will be inside that protective shield of the Almighty. Have a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll look forward to meeting again next week. Shabbat Shalom.